Chapter 21, The Reunion, Part 2. Twilight flinched as the heavy wooden doors of the mansion were flung open. She flinched again at the shrill "ee" that cut through the air, flattening her ears back against her head. She was still trying to identify it when she was tackled to the ground by something fuzzy and loud. Amidst the laughter and exclamations of her friends, Twilight looked up to see Pinkie Pie beaming down at her face framed by a mane that seemed almost to vibrate with poofiness.
You got my invitations!
Twilight coughed as she struggled to regain her breath. A choked laugh pushed its way out of her, only to be interrupted by a sob.
You're okay! We're okay!
Pinkie agreed with a bouncy nod. She jumped off of Twilight and began to dart between Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy, racing to greet them each in turn.
Oh, I missed you all so much! I can't even begin to explain how excited I am! There's so much to tell you! Dashy, what happened to your eye? AJ, why is your barrel all bandaged? Oh no, Fluttershy, why don't you have any cuts or bruises? Have you been emotionally battered? Did you guys get into a fight? What did you find? Where?
Whoa, Nelly, Applejack said. She let out a familiar chuckle. Slow down, Philly. We've been a part of Mod too long to get all caught up in one kick.
Oh, I know!
Pinkie tossed herself back onto her back beside Twilight, stretching her hooves up to the cloudy sky.
There's just so much to say!
Twilight picked herself up off the ground, dusting herself off with a huff.
Don't worry, Pinkie. We'll want to catch up as much as you do. Where's Rarity? Over here, darling.
Twilight turned to see Rarity strutting down the marble steps of the manor with her usual measured gait, her yellow and orange dress swaying around her hooves with each step. Twilight broke out into a wide smile as she ran up to give her friend a hug.
Rarity! We missed you too, my sweet,
Rarity said, returning the hug with a coo of affection.
That goes for all of you,
she added. Twilight let out a deep sigh of relief as she stepped out of the hug.
Oh, I've been so worried. There's been these bounty hunters chasing us, and then we went to Fellas to make sure you were okay, and the whole island was gone.
She lowered her voice, pushing the next words out through clenched teeth.
I thought you two might have been... perish the thought.
Rarity giggled.
And pardon the wordplay. It would take more than an island falling up beneath us to stop two of the elements of harmony.
Her mirth faded, a distant look coming over her. Her voice grew somber as she met Twilight's eyes again.
We have much to discuss.
Twilight cocked her head, picking up on the serious tone. Had Rarity and Pinkie made some discoveries of their own while they were separated? She brushed a hoof over her saddlebags, feeling for the reassuring weight of her notebook and pen. She would need them even more than usual for the coming discussions. Some pony cleared their throat behind Rarity, and Twilight leaned around her friend to see a young, dusty brown Pegasus in a clean orange shirt standing behind her. My lady? He asked. Twilight looked to Rarity, arching a brow. The other unicorn started it as if just remembering something.
Oh, forgive me, dear,
she said, turning to the Pegasus.
Pontius, this is Twilight Sparkle, one of my dear friends. And Twilight, this is Pontius, my...
Her betrothed, Pontius finished. He dipped his head. Glad to make your acquaintance, Lady Sparkle. Twilight choked, her eyes bulging out as she found herself caught between a gasp and a cough.
Betrothed? Twilight, manners?
Rarity chided with a wan smile.
We really have missed a lot, haven't we? Goodness, and I can only imagine what you've all been up to, considering those garish injuries on the others. How long has it been? It certainly doesn't feel like weeks. Betrothed?
Twilight repeated. Rarity sighed. She wrapped a leg around Twilight's shoulders as she raised her voice to speak to the rest of their friends.
I don't know about you all, but I think we should all head inside and settle down, We've got a lot of time to cover.
Pinkie Pie blew out a loud raspberry.
outside. I didn't plan no party inside.
She leveled a hoof on Onyx and Ivory, who had been waiting to the side with opposing degrees of irritation and bemusement.
Put out the call, ponies! It's party time!
It really was amazing what Pinkie Pie could pull together on short notice, Rarity reflected. She was seated at just one of several round wooden tables spread across the grounds of Duke Titus's manor. Lanterns and streamers hung from lines that crisscrossed above the yard, illuminating the space below like flickering stars trailing spirals of blue, green, and yellow. Ponies chatted and joked in the faux starlight, swapping stories over slices of freshly made cake and mugs filled from barrels of cider that waited patiently to be emptied. In one corner of the yard was a cleared space where a group of villagers pulled lively music from string and wind, filling the little corners between conversation with energy and cheer. The stone walls around the yard looked less imposing in this light, the once threatening spearheads that lined the top hidden behind colorful banners. Laughter was abound, and Rarity marveled at the upturned smiles of the very villagers that had seemed so dour when she'd seen them just a day before. It was a party 1,000 years removed from the world Rarity had known, but it was unmistakably a Pinkie Pie party in all its uncouth charm. Rarity's smile faltered as her gaze came back to her friends seated around the table. Rainbow Dash was in the midst of recounting the thrilling tale of the dive into what was once the Everfree Forest. Her wings and hooves alike swept up and down, side to side, as she described the way a fearsome monster had chased their little submarine through the wreckages of 100 other ships. Pinkie Pie bounced along with every rise and fall in Rainbow's voice, while Applejack chipped in with the occasional good-natured addition, and Fluttershy had a quiet smile behind her mane. It was an image hauntingly familiar. If not for the black patch over Rainbow's eye and the murderous monster in her story, Rarity could almost pretend they were back in Ponyville. Almost. Rarity stole a glance towards where Twilight sat next to her. The other unicorn was hunched over a notebook, scribbling away with a pen. A slice of cake waited untouched beside her.
Quite a story, isn't it, darling?
Twilight blinked, looking up from her notes.
What? Yeah, it's...
She paused, grimacing.
It was something.
Rarity frowned.
Are you all right? Can you see in this light? Why don't you light your horn?
Twilight shivered.
I can see fine, thank you.
Rarity's lips twisted into a concerned pout. She leaned forward, lowering her voice.
Twilight, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong,
Twilight said, far too quickly. She sighed.
Well, there's lots of things wrong, but that's been the standard for a while. I just don't feel like listening to the story, okay?
It was clear to Rarity that Twilight wasn't telling her something. The bookish unicorn never just did anything. There was always a reason, and usually that reason was finding the answer to some question she was fixated on. Rarity didn't say anything. She waited patiently. It couldn't have been 10 seconds later that Twilight spoke again.
We found Princess Luna.
You what?
Rarity shrieked. All heads at the table immediately snapped at her, and she let out a tentative giggle.
I know, right?
Rainbow grinned at her, waggling her eyebrows.
She used the stair.
Fluttershy let out a despondent sigh.
Oh, I didn't have any other choice. He was just misbehaving so badly.
Applejack snickered. Just wait till I hear how that story ends. It'll really send you for a spin.
Oh, I can't wait,
Pinkie said.
What happened next? What comes next? Tell me! Cool it, Pinks. Let him here tell a story,
Rainbow said, her grin only growing wider.
Alright, so, Shy's got this thing locked in the stair, but we're still stuck, and Trails...
Rarity cleared her throat. She took a sip of her cider to give her body some time to catch up with her mind. She set the mug back down carefully before rounding on Twilight.
You found Princess Luna?
She hissed.
What? Where is she? She's on the ship,
Twilight said.
Don't worry. Starshields and Sunfeather are there watching her, and I made sure to place some wards around the ship and the cargo bay just in case. Oh, and Dusty Tom's there too. No, I mean, where is she, darling?
Rarity insisted. Her mind flicked back to the brief glimpse she caught of Princess Celestia during the collapse of Phyllis.
Why is she hiding away in the ship? She's not well, Rarity,
Twilight said.
She's in some kind of magical coma. Self-induced by my current theory, though that's unconfirmed. We have to keep her safe and hidden away until I can figure out how to bring her out of it. Oh.
Rarity let out the breath she'd been holding.
Right. Of course. But do you have an idea?
Twilight shrugged, never taking her eyes off her notes.
I have a theory. I haven't really been able to focus on it much. We were attacked by a griffin bounty hunter named Gava, and then we thought she might be going after you and Pinkie, and I was just so worried. And I'm working on something for Rainbow's Eye, and there's so much.
Twilight closed her eyes and shook her head.
I'm stretched so thin, Rarity. It feels like I'm going to snap. You are pushing yourself too hard. Like you always do,
Rarity said. She put a hoof on Twilight's back, ignoring the coarse fabric of the drab crew uniform she was wearing, and began rubbing soothing circles into it.
We're safe, Twilight. We have time.
Her mouth hung open as she considered adding more.
I saw Princess Celestia.
Just 4 words, and they'd been trapped inside her for as many days. She had to tell her friends, but Twilight already looked to have reached her limit. What would she do if she learned that her mentor was still out there, in any form?
We're not safe,
Twilight hissed.
Eva is relentless. She tracked us from Hightown all the way to the Everfree, and who knows if she tracked us here too? Or any other bounty hunters for that matter.
Rarity grimaced.
Well, Pinkie and I have had a few run-ins, but we've held our own. See?
Twilight's eyes darted around the crowd, jumping from pony to pony.
It could be anyone. We can't let our cards down. Twilight, stop it.
Rarity chided.
Nobody's going to jump out of the shadows. Not here, at the very least. Duke Titus is a very respected noble with a well-trained retinue of soldiers, and we're not entirely helpless either.
She couldn't help but steal a glance at Rainbow's eye patch.
We can defend ourselves if it comes down to it. You're right.
Twilight shook her head, looking back down to her notes. After a second, her gaze traveled to her untouched cake.
I do need to unwind. Pinkie put a lot of effort into this party. It would certainly do you well.
Rarity agreed. She watched as Twilight grabbed the plate in her hooves and raised it to her mouth for a bite. She could not but cock her head at the lack of magic.
Odd.
Her attention drifted back to the rest of the table just in time for a dramatic reveal from Rainbow Dash.
It was only like a minute tops, but it might as well have been days, she was saying. We were just about to blast a path through when Flint spoke to us over the radio, and then Twilight, right after. And you know what she told us?
Pinkie looked about ready to explode out of her seat.
What did she tell you?
Rainbow Dash leaned over the table, lowering her voice. Pinkie Pie leaned in closer to hear.
We had found Princess Luna.
What?
Pinkie shrieked. Rainbow looked to Rarity expectantly. Rarity blinked, realizing that she was supposed to be surprised, and managed to summon a flustered,
Oh, goodness.
Oh, goodness.
Rainbow echoed with disdain.
That's it? Princess Luna, Rarity. Didn't you hear me?
Don't get y'all's lasso in a knot, RD. Applejack said. She ain't obliged to react a certain way to your story.
But, Princess Luna!
Rainbow repeated. Oh, you hush.
What happened next?
Pinkie asked.
Was she okay? Where is she?
Hold your horses, Pinkie, Applejack said. The story ain't done yet. There was a whole nother rodeo waiting for them when they got back to the ship. Let me tell you on my side of it. Twilight took another bite of her cake. She felt a little clumsy eating without her magic, but it was just as delicious as any Pinkie Pie cake had ever been, nonetheless. Rarity was right. She needed to enjoy the party. She couldn't help but smile as she listened to Applejack take her turn at storytelling, using just as much embellishment and flair as Rainbow had.
They're probably making some kind of contest out of it, knowing those two. I mean, really, 3 chains?
She told it as if 6 ponies couldn't hold her down working together. Still, Twilight couldn't deny that it was entertaining. She hadn't heard the dramatic rendition of Applejack's part in the fight before. She was distracted by Rarity letting out a polite cough. Twilight looked to her expectantly.
I should tell you something, Twilight, but I don't want you to overreact.
Twilight arched a brow. She swallowed the cake in her mouth so that she could speak.
Well, I'll do my best. What is it, Rarity?
Rarity's voice hitched. She closed her eyes and took another breath. Her words came out in a rush.
Twilight, I saw Princess Celestia.
Twilight was glad that she wasn't holding the plate in her magic. She was certain that any spell, even one as simple as levitation, would have fizzled out in that moment. Instead of dropping out of a magic aura with a loud clatter, her plate instead found itself lodged between hooves that felt made of stone. Twilight very deliberately lowered her hooves and wrenched them apart, allowing the plate to return to the table with a quiet tink. There was a ringing in her ears. The table appeared to be spinning, but Twilight knew it was just an illusion of her mental disorientation. She squeezed her eyes shut.
Where? In Fellis as it collapsed,
Rarity said.
It was just a couple glimpses as we left, but I am certain of it. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. It was Princess Celestia, although she did not look well. How do you mean?
Twilight asked.
Celestia is alive. Of course she's alive. She's alive. She's alive. I knew she was alive the whole time, didn't I? I'm the faithful student. She looked sick. Her mane was patchy and her wings were drooping and her eyes. Red tears?
Twilight asked.
Celestia wouldn't leave me. It's just like I thought. She's out there waiting to be found. I don't know,
Rarity admitted.
It was just a brief glimpse. She just felt cold. Cold.
Twilight echoed.
I can do this. We have Luna. Celestia is out there. I can save them both. Everything will be all right.
Twilight saw the path clearly stretched before her. Wake up Luna. With her help, find and wake up Celestia. The princesses would know what to do. They would know what had happened.
Twilight, dear. Are you all right?
Twilight opened her eyes. The table wasn't spinning anymore. Her breathing was calm.
I'm just going to go for a walk real quick, Rarity. Thanks for telling me.
She stood up abruptly. Applejack arched a brow. Off to use the stall, Sugar Cube? Story's just getting good.
I'll be right back, Applejack,
Twilight said. Her words sounded robotic in her own ears.
Don't wait for me.
She turned and walked away without waiting for a response. The crowd felt thicker. The spearheads lining the walls leered down at her from their stone thrones, hidden behind a thin dressing of ribbon. She needed to be on her own. She had to get out just for a little bit. Celestia was alive. She traced a path around the tables and to the open gate of the yard. Ivory and another guard that Twilight didn't recognize waited on either side. The question in Ivory's eyes was clear.
I'm going for a walk,
Twilight said.
I'll be right back, don't worry.
Ivory looked away. Twilight stepped through the gate, and nobody stopped her. She walked through the darkness without direction, her eyes focused without seeing on the ground in front of her. The distant sound of music and laughter faded into the background, along with the chirping of the crickets and the rustle of the wind running over the grass. Celestia was still alive. A light drizzle began to fall, and Twilight welcomed the feel of the cold droplets slapping against her back. There was a brief uproar from the party, and when it subsided, it seemed that the villagers had taken the light rain as encouragement. Celestia was out there. She was at Fellis as it collapsed. A pensive frown crawled over Twilight's face. Philomena had been in the ruins of Fellis. Was she still following her old master? Had Twilight passed right over Celestia without noticing in her haste to confirm the fate of her friends? A wave of nausea passed over her. Celestia was alive. That was a good thing.
Stop fretting!
Celestia had been at Fellis when it collapsed. Correlation did not imply causation. Celestia was alive, and she could be rescued. Once she had a spell theory for waking up Luna, it could be tested. Success could be refined and then applied to Celestia as well. Good.
You lost, witch?
Twilight was so deep in her thoughts that she nearly didn't register the words. She looked up from her hooves for the first time, and her blood ran cold. Gava was perched before her, on top of a boulder half buried in the earth and silhouetted by the drizzling rain that sparkled in the moonlight. Twilight stiffened, feeling her pulse quicken. Magic bubbled up inside her. It wanted to act, to remove the threat. She suppressed it. She couldn't afford to lose control.
Gava?
Gava grinned.
You remember my name. I'm flattered. What was yours again?
Twilight was suddenly all too aware of how alone she was. She took some slow steps backwards.
What are you doing here?
Weird name,
Gava said. She raised her forelegs, showing empty talons.
I'm just here to talk, alright? No need to get snappy.
You ate Rainbow's eye.
That is true,
Gava said. She jumped down into the grass and began to advance, her steps slow and deliberate.
I did do that. On the other wing, you nearly wrecked my ship, so I think you got the better end of that deal.
Nearly wasn't near enough.
Twilight growled. She stole a quick glance behind her, but all she saw was the shadow of the Duke's estate against the stars. Could she make a break for it? The griffin would surely catch her. She could risk a teleport, but what if she lost control? She looked back at the bounty hunter.
Why are you chasing us?
You know, that's a good question.
Gava's beak twisted into a dangerous grin.
I've had a lot of people ask me that. Friends, enemies, victims. At first it was money, of course. Gifted like you, if subdued, would set me and my crew up for years.
My crew and I.
Gava blinked.
What?
My crew and I is the proper way to say it,
Twilight said. Gava sighed.
Whatever. It's pretty clear to me you're not worth the trouble of capturing.
So then why are you here?
Twilight asked. She took another cautious step backwards.
Leave us alone if we're not worth the trouble.
Not worth the trouble financially. No.
Gava said with a nod, matching each of Twilight's steps with a longer one of her own. The distance between them grew shorter.
But you know what you are? Dangerous. The most dangerous game. It's not about the money anymore.
Anger swelled in Twilight's chest.
Stop right there!
She crouched down, allowing some magic to pool in her horn. She aimed the tip at Gava as if to cast a spell.
Don't come any closer!
Gava arched a brow but complied. She sat back on her haunches.
Not a game,
she corrected, wagging a single talon.
A hunt. Very serious.
She fluffed her wings out, bringing a hand to her heart.
You're my legacy and my dream, Pony. You and your friends. I'll be the only hunter in all of history who will be able to say that they caught the Purple Witch. And that's a cause worth striving for. Don't get ahead of yourself, Gava,
Twilight said. Her horn began to glow brighter. The darkness rolled over inside her, pushing her to fight.
You haven't caught me yet.
No,
Gava agreed. She winked.
Not yet.
A thrill of panic ran down Twilight's spine. She sent a ping out around her, stiffening as she detected the figure crouched down behind her. There was a rustle of grass, and she felt the wind of wing beats on her flanks. The shield spell was already in mind as she twisted around to face a pair of slitted amber eyes. Time slowed down as she saw the ring descending on her. Glowing white runes were engraved into the iron.
Let the magic go, little flower.
Twilight felt the other curled up inside her, coiled like a spring and eager to pounce. She hesitated. The heavy iron ring slipped over the top of her horn. She cried out and fell backwards. No lavender shield sprang into being as she landed in the damp grass. The ring settled on the base of her horn, glowing a pale white as it held her magic back. The Thestral flashed a set of fanged teeth at her.
Gotcha.
Twilight grit her teeth. She screamed her fury as she poured more magic into her horn. The other's voice echoed in her head.
Destroy them! Release our power and show them what it is to face a goddess!
The glow of the iron ring grew brighter, but no magic came forth. No sparkling spears of energy tore their souls from their bodies. No radiant beams of magic burnt the flesh from their bones. Twilight lay in the wet glass, screaming in impotent, mindless rage at the bounty hunter standing over her.
Oh, shut up,
Gava said. Twilight watched as the griffin pulled the revolver from the holster fastened to her chest and brought the grip down on her head.
That was creepy for you too, right?
Anna asked.
Like, wow, did you see that look in her eyes?
Gava grimaced. The purple unicorn beneath them had deep bags under her eyes.
There's something up with that mare. I'm almost worried she'll break the ring.
She can't break the ring,
Anna said.
I don't care how strong she is. That thing's pre-flood.
Gava shrugged.
Guess we'll see, huh?
She turned to a nearby copse of trees and let out a sharp whistle. A pair of earth ponies crept out of the shadows, eyeing the unconscious unicorn as if they were afraid she was going to suddenly open her eyes and evaporate them all.
Take her to the Screech and tell Top we're good to go.
The hirelings nodded. Gingerly, they braced the limp purple body, still giving off a pale white light from the ring on its horn, and began to walk away.
And don't touch that ring,
Anna added.
She'll probably kill you if you do.
Do we really have to tell them that?
Gava asked, turning back to her sister. Anna shrugged.
You never know. Some people are dumb enough to attack a ship full of gifted with unknown capabilities in a head-on assault, after all.
Gava narrowed her eyes. Anna nudged her with a wing.
You're welcome.
You truly are my better half.
Gava drawled.
Smart half, at least.
Gava rolled her eyes.
So that's the witch down. You said the second unicorn was the other big threat?
Anna nodded.
As long as you're wearing clothes, yeah. I think that holster would be enough, even. I'll handle her. But Pinkie Pie is a wild card.
That just leaves Die Job, the cow pony, and the skinny yellow one.
Gava said. She turned towards the soft glow of the illuminated manor in the distance.
That shouldn't be a problem.
And Titus and his soldiers.
Anna added.
Can't forget about them. There's a lot of ponies in there.
I'm sure the Duchess will be more than enough to balance that out.
Gava said. She flared her wings.
You ready?
More ready than you, that's for sure.
Again, Gava rolled her eyes. She took flight with a couple powerful beats of her wings. She couldn't hear the Thestral's wings, but she knew that she was following. They were together now. No prey could escape them.